With another amazing show. Welcome to the show. I'm Jay Connor, the Private Money Authority. And if you're brand new to the show, you know, or you may not know, that I have amazing guests that join me every week here on the show. And if you're not new, you know that is the case. First of all, we absolutely love and appreciate your likes and your shares and your ratings and your reviews on iTunes. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, be sure and click that bell so you don't miss out on any notifications of our upcoming amazing shows. Well, I'm Jay Connor, the Private Money Authority. Funding your deals with none of your own money is my favorite subject, and my guest today has got quite a bit of experience in that as well. Well, my guest today, his favorite quote is, "Keep the best and wholesale the rest." Yes, that's the motto of my guest. He's a killer investor from St. Louis, Missouri. In fact, to be exact, I think my guest is actually from Kirkwood, Missouri, which is where my sister Casey lives, as a matter of fact. Well, anyway, on the show today, my guest is going to be dropping some real nuggets. So if you're driving in your car or you're on your commute, you won't be taking notes, but if you happen to be around the house, sitting around, now's a good time to grab a pen and a paper, because I tell you, he's really going to lay it out for us. So my guest actually started investing all the way back when he was still in college at the age of 20. And man, is he on fire now. He's doing it all. He's doing wholesales. He's picking and choosing which deals he wants to stay in, which ones he wants to, wholesale on out. He does fixes, he does flips, he's a landlord. So he started out wholesaling properties early on, but he very, very quickly realized there's a better way to do the business, right? You want more options. So that's where the inspiration for my guest took his real estate investment strategy and really has been involved over the past decade. He is a specialist in this strategy called the BRRRR Method. That's the only way I know how to pronounce it, because you spell it BRRRR method. And that's about acquiring rental properties with none of your own money. Again, my favorite subject. How in the world do you acquire properties with none of your own money? And then my guest is going to talk about all these different kinds of exit strategies that you have available. With that, welcome to the show, my friend, David Dodge. Hello, David. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jay. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to have you on, David. I tell you, you hang around with some mighty good friends that I've got in that organization called Wholesaling Inc. From
That's
yourself,
right.
Brent Daniels, to the founder, Tom Kroll, and on and on and on and on and on. So anyway, I love your family that you are a member of. So I'm so excited to have you on the show, David. As we get started in here, I mentioned to everybody that you actually started investing back in real estate when you were 20 years old. So tell us how your journey actually got started. How did that happen?
Man, that's such a great question, Jay. I'm so glad you asked. So, I started at the age of 20 and I was house hacking. I was living in a college town, and I knew I wanted to get into real estate. One of my teachers was a really big Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Robert Kiyosaki fan. So we actually took a class in college, or I did, and it was all based on that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I started by house hacking. And did
now
that.
Tell everybody what that means. House hacking.
Yeah, of course. So house hacking is where you buy a house and you live in one of the rooms or maybe even one of the units, and then you rent out the rest of the units or the rest of the house. So the first one I did was a 4-bedroom. I lived in one of those bedrooms, rented out the other 3. And, the cost of me living in that property was like $100 a month.
Well, that cash flow sort of works, right? I mean, how much was your rent and how much did you collect from the other 3?
So oh man, that's 17 years ago. You're going to put me on the spot like that, huh, Jay?
Well, my land's 37 years old. Sort of looks mighty young to me today.
That's right. That's right. So I think I was charging the guys $300 a month, maybe $350. Call it $350. That sounds about right at the time, 17 years ago. So that's $369. That was $1050 I was collecting. and the mortgage with PITI was $1,150. So I had to pay $100 a month to own the house, essentially. So the guys were paying, 95% of it. And then we all split the utilities. Well, I did that 3 times in college. So after I did the first one, I moved to the second one, but then I would rent out the room I lived in. So instead of paying $100 a month to own the property, I'm starting to make $300 a month to own the property. I did that 3 times through college. And throughout my 20s, I had different jobs and different, various sales and marketing roles. And I had some small entrepreneurial businesses that I ran, selling stuff online, just doing all types of stuff. But throughout my 20s, Jay, I bought a house a year on average. I think two years I got lucky and bought 2 houses. But basically after 10 years, at the age of 30, I had 12 rental properties. But here's the thing, Jay, I did it wrong. Here's the curveball.
How did you do it wrong?
I did it wrong because I was using banks to buy.
Mm.
And when you use banks to buy, you got to have 20 to 30% to put down, if you're going to use a conventional loan.
And who makes the rules when you borrow from the bank?
The bank makes the rules when you borrow from the bank. Now, obviously, there could have been, a way for me to get, an FHA loan. I'm not a veteran, so I wouldn't qualify for VA loans, but there are ways to get into these a little bit less than having a minimum of 20% down. But the first 12 I did over that first 10 years, Jay, I put down 20% on every one of them. And the average purchase price was about $150. So if you do the math, that's $30,000 that I had to put down on every one of these assets I bought during the first 10 years. And here's the thing, Jay, I didn't even have the money most of the time. Most of the time I would go borrow that from friends and family and acquaintances. And then I would use it to get into the deal. And then I'd pay them back over a year or two, and towards the end of that end of my 20s, I had different various jobs and businesses, and I would actually have the money to put down. And to me, it's always been a great way to park money in real estate. But nowadays, I don't do it like I did back then, the first 10 years. Nowadays, I use the BRRRR method, and we do still work with the banks, but we never go ask a bank to buy a house. We always use private and hard money to buy it. And we often will borrow the full purchase, the full rehab. And in some cases, I just closed on one this morning here. So not a home run, but it's about $5,300, right? So not a home run. But Jay, this is such a great case study here because, and you can see I'm sitting in front of my board here if you're watching this, but we bought this property at a discount. We rehabbed it. We got it rented. And then we refinanced with the bank and borrowed 80% of what it appraises for. And we were able to pay back our lender in full for the purchase, the rehab, the interest, all of the closing costs, and we walked away with a check for $5,300. So, this is a great case study example here because, and this is just 2 hours ago. I just left the closing table a couple hours ago. But this is such a great example of how powerful the BRRRR method is because not always do we walk with money. Sometimes we have to leave $1,000 or $2,000 in the deal. But come on, $1,000 or $2,000 to leave into a deal to acquire an asset versus what I used to do in my 20s where I'd have to save up or borrow $30,000 to get into these. So that's why I love the BRRRR method.
David, let's make sure I understand what you just said. So what you just said was you just closed on a property and it's a single family house, right?
It was a refi. Mm-hmm.
So you bought, okay. So you already owned it, right?
Yeah. So I bought it like 3, maybe 4 months ago.
Okay. And when you bought it,
I used a private lender to buy it. Yeah. I borrowed the money from them, but I didn't just borrow the purchase. I borrowed the purchase and the rehab and 10 extra thousand.
So okay. So let's go back to the purchase 4 months ago. When you bought this property, you didn't take any of your own money to the closing
Not a
table.
dollar.
You borrowed enough money for the purchase, the rehab, you got all that money up front, and you borrowed an extra $10,000.
Yep.
So in other words, you got paid $10,000 to buy that property with no money out of your pocket, right?
Well, yes and no. I didn't take any of that money and put it in my pocket. I kept it in my operating account because I wanted to use it to cover the interest. I wanted to use it to cover the closing costs, and I wanted it to cover any of my holding and utility costs and my taxes and my prepaids. So what it inevitably allowed me to do was walk with 5,300. I think that's what this is. Yeah, 5,300. So even though I borrowed the extra 10, I did that strategically so I wouldn't have to use $1 of my own money, Jay, to acquire this asset. I knew that if I borrowed the purchase and the rehab, that I'm going to have to pay all that back plus interest. But because I'm an expert and I've been doing this for 17 years, I also knew that whenever I go to refinance, there's going to be closing costs. And while I'm rehabbing it, I may go over budget. And I don't want to have to dig into my own pockets to cover that. And I knew that I'd have to have the water and the electric and the gas and the sewer and the trash bills paid while I'm rehabbing it. And I know that I have to also get it rented. And then I know that when I go and I refinance, the last step in BRRRR, if you're not including the repeat, my favorite step, of course, that I would have to pay closing costs with my bank. And I'd have to pay title costs. And because the bank I used on this one offers the ability to escrow, I took advantage of that and I had to prepay escrows. So I over borrowed 10,000, knowing that, that I wasn't going to essentially put that 10 in my pocket. But what that allowed me to do was not have to dig into my pockets at all. I could use that extra money to help cover all of these additional bills and expenses throughout the process. Now, I've done about 200 of these BRRRR deals, Jay. So I would consider myself to be the authority, just like you are the private money authority. I consider myself to be the authority when it comes to using the BRRRR method. I've written a book on it. It's called the BRRRR Method. Pretty straightforward. You can find that on Amazon or Audible. And I've done about 200 of these. And I'm actually sitting in front of a wall right now that's got some Monopoly looking pieces on it. And there's 90 units on that wall. And I've used the BRRRR method to acquire every single one of those, Jay.
That's awesome. We're going to talk about the BRRRR method in detail here in a moment. You and I have got a lot in common, David, and that is not using any of our money. You just showed a check, right? When you got towards the end of the BRRRR method. And like you, when I buy a house, I never use any of my own money. I always bring home a big check, no matter what the deal is when I purchase. Here's one right here. 5 days ago, let's make the screen big. 5 days ago, I brought home this check right here for $29,000.
$29,000. Look at that. That looks great.
And that's just buying the property. That's buying the property before, I did anything to it. So like you, I got the rehab money up front. I got some carrying costs. And I tell you what, David, before we dive into the BRRRR method, which I really want our listener to really get their minds wrapped around, let's put our listener on the fast track on this private money thing. I want to give everybody right now, I just finished writing this, David. I just finished writing this private money guide. It's called The 7 Reasons Why Private Money Will Skyrocket Your Real Estate Business and Help You Build Incredible Wealth. If you want to get private money like really, really fast and get big checks to bring home and put none of your own money in the deal up front, you can get this for free. It's a free download at jayconner, JAYCONNER.com/money guide. That's www.jayconner.com/money guide. That will get you on the fast track to getting a lot of private money so you don't miss out on any deals. So, David, let's talk about this BRRRR method. First of all, tell people what BRRRR stands for.
Yes, sir. So BRRRR is an acronym. And my definition of BRRRR is just a strategy that we use to acquire assets very rapidly with little to no money. So that's what it means. But the acronym in and in itself is the actual steps that we take. So BRRRR is B with 4 R's. The B stands for buy, and the 4 R's stand for rehab, rent, refinance, and then, of course, repeat. And that's really what I love about this strategy is Again, it allows us to acquire assets with little to no money very rapidly, but it's one of these things that you can actually scale up very, very quickly. So some people refer to it as the BRRRR method, which is just replacing one of the R's with an S. And instead of saying repeat at the end, they say scale. It's essentially the same exact thing. I didn't invent or create the BRRRR method, but I have been a huge fan of it for the last 5 or 6 years. And I have been focused my time and efforts primarily on this method for the last 3.5 years. And we've done about 200 individual BRRRR deals to date. And my portfolio is averaging $1,200 per asset added. And if you calculate in the fact that these assets pay me to own them, they cash flow, after 3 to 5 months, I don't have any money invested in the property after a couple months, right? Because again, I have to typically on average leave $1,200 in a property. Now, sometimes that may be $4,000 or $5,000. Sometimes it's zero, and that's the goal, always zero. Sometimes I can actually walk with a couple thousand like I did this morning. So
now that check that you just walked with, that's the next to the last R, which is the refinancing of that property, right?
Yeah. So the check that you showed earlier, I got one just like that 3.5 months ago when I bought this particular property. I borrowed the purchase, and that went straight across the title company to the seller. They walked out of that office with that money. But I also borrowed the rehab and 10,000 more, just like you did in that scenario. So 3.5 months ago, when I bought this property, I walked out of there with, I'm going to throw out a number here, about 40 grand. It might have been 1,000 or two less, give or take exactly, but it was about 40,000. And I knew that my rehab was going to be about 30,000. So I basically had padded the rehab in case we went over, and also added in the additional, amount of money to cover the things like the interest and the closing and the utilities and the title fees and the insurance and all that type of stuff. So what I did this morning was actually pay back my lender for the purchase, for the rehab, and all of that interest. And I paid the title company, and I was able to do this transaction and walk with a little bit of money. But here's the coolest part, Jay. I now have an asset that's got 30 grand worth of rehab, renovation, update, however you want to look at it. Those are all the same things in my mind, but they may be different things to different people. But we put a brand new roof on this house. We put in new windows. We put in a brand new HVAC. We did a little bit of plumbing work. We put in new flooring throughout, in a new kitchen, and 2 new bathrooms. So all of the capital expenditures on this property should be handled for the next 5 to 7 years, maybe 10, right? So that's the best part about this method. Being able to acquire an asset with little to no money, that's really cool to the newbie. They're like, oh, that's amazing. But you know what's really cool to the professionals like you and me? It's adding properties to our portfolio that are rehabbed. We're not buying properties that are just kind of okay. Everything is new in these properties. And that's also what makes this strategy work so well, Jay, because of course we're using OPM, other people's money, to get positioned in here. But part of this process is rehabbing. And by rehabbing it, we increase the value of the property, which does 2 things. It gives us a higher appraisal, which is what we're getting a loan on anyway at the end of the day. But it also allows us to charge the most amount of rent possible. We're either getting market rent, or I'd say 75% of the time, we're setting a new market rent. So because look at the inventory and look at the options. Put yourself in the shoes of the renter. The renter could go rent something that's got 5, 6, 7-year-old cabinets and countertops, or they could rent a property from us that's got brand new stuff in it. So they're going to be willing to pay a lot more, and they're also typically going to be willing to stay a lot longer. So being able to acquire assets with little to no money is awesome. But what's even cooler in my mind, Jay, is the ability to acquire assets that don't need a bunch of work right away. Most of the assets that we buy, we can essentially eliminate most of the big ticket items for at least the first 5 to 7 years at a minimum. So that's what I love about this strategy.
And the BRRRR method is one of the best strategies for building long-term wealth, right?
That's exactly right. So the BRRRR method, in my opinion, has 5, if not 6 advantages. So number one, you're going to create cash flow because you're going to acquire rental properties. That's really what this method is designed to do. It's to help you acquire rentals. And rentals, if done right, will pay you to own them. You charge more in rent than all of the net operating it or all of the expenses, right? So your net operating income on these properties is positive. It's cash flow. It's amazing, right? Number 2 is it's good debt. A lot of people are scared of debt. Well, if you put debt on a credit card, like one of these guys, you got to pay it back typically. But if you go rack up debt on an asset, a property that's rented out, the tenants are going to pay that debt off for you. Now, it may not happen in a day or a week or a month, but over a course of 5, 10, 20 years, you can have houses that are paid off. In fact, I got a house right here that I paid off just a couple weeks ago. This house is worth over $100,000. So having good debt is a massive, massive, massive advantage over having bad debt. So you have to understand the difference between these two things. So number 1, cash flow. Number 2, good debt. Number 3 is the ability to use leverage. And Jay, let me tell you, I love leverage. My middle name is leverage. Not literally, but it should be. Here's why. I use leverage to position myself into deals, right? I do marketing. I have virtual assistants that help me set appointments and send offers. Once I locate a deal, I'm going to leverage big time on a title company to make sure it's legit and that the title's clean. And then I'm going to leverage a private money or hard money lender to buy it. Then I'm going to leverage general contractors to fix it. Then I'm going to leverage property managers to rent it. And then last but not least, I'm going to leverage my long-term banks and credit unions to reposition the debt into a long-term loan at a cheap rate, ultimately paying back my private or hard money lenders. So leverage is in every step of the process, but leverage is what allows me to do cool things like this with you today and not be out on the job site with a hammer and a paintbrush. I don't like doing that type of stuff. I like talking to people like you that are also experts. So leverage would be number 3. Number 4 would be appreciation. This is really just so much more. This is really more for rentals. But the BRRRR method will allow you to acquire rentals with little to no money. So it kind of goes like this, right? But appreciation over the last 36 years, we've seen an average of 6 to 6.5% year over year, right? So I never bank on appreciation, Jay. I'll tell you, I think people that buy a property and hope to sell it in 6 months to a year, they're speculating. But if you have a long enough mindset, 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 or 30 years, the odds of the property appreciating is very, very likely. It's not guaranteed, but it's very, very likely. The longer time span, the more likely you're going to get to take advantage of appreciation. Number 5, tax benefits. A lot of people don't know this, but you only pay tax when you earn income or create an income or a taxable event because of income. So if your goal every day is to wake up and to make money, you're going to guarantee that you're going to have to pay tax on that. But if your goal every day is like me to wake up and create wealth, wealth isn't taxed. Income is taxed. So instead of flipping that property and putting 20 or 30 grand in my pocket, I'm going to hold it and I'm going to have $20,000 or $30,000 worth of equity. And it could be double that in some cases, right? But that $20,000 or $30,000 worth of equity, I'm going to use to position myself in the deal with the refi, but I'm also going to have that available and I can sell the property if I need to, or I can borrow against the property to access that money. But that $20,000 or $30,000 worth of equity, Jay, isn't income. It's wealth that's been created. And you don't pay tax when you create wealth. You only pay tax when you create income. So my goal isn't to necessarily make more money. It's to create as much wealth as I possibly can because I can defer paying taxes on it until I sell it and actually have an income event. And then Jay, last but not least, number 6, wealth creation in and in itself, right? So taxes, you don't pay tax on wealth creation, you pay it on income. But real estate in the BRRRR method is one of the best ways to massively expand your wealth in a short period of time because the tax laws are written by people that own real estate. They're written by rich people. When's the last time you saw somebody go from White Castle to the state or even a federal Senate. It doesn't happen, my friend. What happens is wealthy people run for office and they spend a lot of money to campaign. And then when they get there, they write the laws to protect themselves and their friends. I don't necessarily agree with this, Jay, but what I can tell you is this. There's 76,000 pages of tax code. 3 or 4 of those pages tell you when, how, and where to pay. The other 75,900 and change are going to tell you how to not pay it, defer paying it, pay it later, and avoid it altogether legally. So real estate is one of the best ways to create wealth because it's actually written into the tax law. Every year that you own a rental property, you can depreciate that property. You're using leverage to get into it and own it. It's cash flowing, and you're not paying taxes on the wealth that you're creating, only the income. Now, the income could be taxable, of course. The cash flow, right? Of course. But at the end of the day, the wealth or the equity that is captured isn't. So my goal isn't to go make an extra $300,000 to $500,000 a year. That just means I'm going to give Uncle Sam a raise. My goal is to go create $300,000 to $500,000 or double in some cases worth of wealth every year, because then I can compound that wealth and I can do it with lots of leverage. I can make money in terms of cash flow along the way. Oh, and by the way, if I ever want to refinance one of these properties and pull out some of that wealth, it's not taxed because it's debt. It's not income, it's debt when you refinance and pull money out. So the advantages are a mile long. I could go on if you want me to.
I love it, David. I wish you would get a little bit more excited about the BRRRR method.
I love this method.
One thing that a new real estate investor that may have some trepidation about, or some concern or some fear, is they don't want to deal with tenants and them calling them at 2 o'clock in the morning with a leak and all that kind of stuff. And I heard you mention a few minutes ago that you don't deal with them. You have a strategy that takes care of that. And what is that?
Yeah, so I did manage my own tenants for the first, I would say 12 to 13 years, give or take. And again, I didn't have that many rentals at the time. I had, somewhere between 12 and 20, during that time. Well, I guess started with one, the first one, right? So between 1 and 20. But now my goal is to scale, and it's to go buy 2 or 3 houses a month on a good month, maybe even 4 or 5, right? And we don't answer the phone for tenants. Somebody else does, and it's a property management company. In fact, I work with 3 of them right now. And we pay them. They take a percentage of the gross rents. It's often low, usually between 8 and 10%. I've even had some that only charge me 6%. So, it's not terrible. And then, of course, we pay them for the leasing, and they'll typically take anywhere between 1/2 or 3/4 of the first month's rent. So they will handle the leasing. They will handle issues. They will handle phone calls in the middle of the night on your behalf. And they may even have their own maintenance crews. We prefer to send our own maintenance guys because that could be a way for the property manager to mark services up, and we don't necessarily want that. We like to control the expenses. So we have people that we can send out to fix toilets or roofs or windows or doors or carpet or whatever it is that needs attention. So again, we leverage property managers, Jay. We love property managers. At the end of the day, they like to do that job, and I don't typically like it. Some people watching or listening, they may not, it may not be a big deal to them. I did it on my own for over a decade. But again, here's the thing. My focus right now isn't to optimize my business to make the most amount of money, because getting rid of a property manager and doing it myself would probably be the way to, cut some expense, of course. But I would much rather have my time and the freedom to come into work when I want and focus my energy on scaling. As you can see, I'm sitting in front of about 70 individual properties behind me here, give or take. And that equals to about 90. I think last I counted, we were at 92. Well, I guess with this morning's check, we're at 93. So we have 93 individual units that we own. We've used the BRRRR method to acquire all of these. I think I mentioned that our average out of pocket's $1,200. And again, 3-4 months later, you got that back too. So basically this entire portfolio that I'm sitting in front of right here, Jay, I don't have a dollar of my own money invested into it. Not one.
David, you mentioned the BRRRR method, talk about that a lot. Well, the first letter in the BRRRR method is this letter B, which stands for buy. In today's market, in a lot of markets, in most markets, it's very challenging to find the properties. What are your top 1, 2, or 3 ways for finding these properties in today's market?
That's an excellent question, Jay. I'm glad you asked. So I focused on wholesaling when I first started investing in real estate almost 8 years ago. And I did that exclusively for probably about 3 years. And the last 5, I said, you know what? Wholesaling's great. It's a good place to start for a lot of people. But you end up getting on this transaction treadmill, meaning that once you do a deal, you got to go out and you got to find the next one, right? Well, rental properties pay you every single month once you own them. As long as you manage them properly and you keep them, the maintenance and the property up to par, that property should rent. And if it's rented and you collect the rent and you can pay more than what you owe, you make money. It's simple. So you get to make money every day. You even get to make money while you're sleeping when you own rentals. It's amazing. So to answer your question, I have used a lot of the marketing methods that I was using to wholesale to locate deals today and over the last few years, really so much over the last 8 that I've been full-time. So those methods are simple and I could lay them out for you very quickly. So number 1, I avoid the MLS. Last year, my partner and I, we bought 162 houses. We bought 3 of them off the MLS. So when I say I avoid it, I don't go looking there. A property could be on the MLS and an agent calls me and says, hey, this guy's motivated, make any offer, he'll take it. Well, that's great, but I don't look on the MLS for deals. And there's a very specific reason why I don't do that, Jay. And I can answer that question for you if you like. But to answer your initial question is what do I do to find these deals? It's direct to seller marketing. We don't go on the MLS because there's an agent in the way that's already promised the seller that they're going to do everything they can to get them the most amount of money. The motivation is not typically there. So we go direct to seller, and we do that in a bunch of ways. We do it with cold calling, cold texting, direct mail, bandit signs, radio ads, online ads like on Facebook or social media, Google pay-per-click. We network with other people and other investors that can bring us deals. We get deals from property management companies, eviction attorneys, divorce attorneys. I get deals from my accountant because she's got other clients that may inherit a property or get a property. We get deals from all over. I mean, there is an infinite amount of ways to find somebody that is distressed. Driving for dollars is one of my favorite methods. We drive around, we look for properties that need work, Jay. And if they have a tarp on the roof or boarded up windows or a broken down car in the driveway, hey, there's probably some distress going on. So here's the thing about distress. It could be a property that's distressed. It could be a person that's distressed. And sometimes it could be both. And all we do as real estate investors, me as a landlord, but also as a wholesaler and a fix and flipper, all we do is find people that have problems and we offer to help them solve those problems. So that to me looks like convenience. We're giving them convenience. And in exchange for the convenience, Jay, we're demanding a discount. And the bigger discount they want to give us, the bigger convenience will open up the floodgates for them. So, to answer your question, it's just marketing. It's direct to the seller marketing. It's not keeping your business a secret. It's so incredibly important. Tell people you're looking to buy houses. Tell them that you want the ones that need a lot of work. If your his colleague at work has a house that they need to sell and it needs a ton of work and your cousin doesn't know that you do this, you're not going to get that lead. So you got to be very, very outspoken. Tell everybody, wear t-shirts and go on your social media and post every week or two and saying, I'm looking for a fixer-upper. So there's really an infinite number of ways, Jay, but you got to get loud. You got to be excited about this business too.
David, a final question before we let everybody know how to connect with you and continue the conversation. What's your biggest mistake you've made in real estate?
Oh man, that's a quick one. I mean, really, I would say I've only lost money on 3 properties, and I've done close to 1,000 transactions. And all 3 of the properties that I lost money on, I overestimated my ARV, or my after repair value, and I underestimated my repairs. All 3 of those properties, I either did one of those or both of those. So my advice to anybody that's new, if you think it's going to cost 20 to fix it, it's probably going to cost 25 or 30. Don't underestimate it. You're shooting yourself in the foot. So just give yourself a healthy budget for repairs. And then on the flip side, Jay, if you think that the property is going to sell for 400 and you're very confident of that number, that's good. But if you're thinking that it's going to sell for 450 and all your other comps are at 400, again, you're putting yourself in a situation where you can essentially fail. So just be conservative on both of those and you'll be good to go.
David, it has been wonderful having you on the show. How can people connect with you, David, and continue the conversation?
Yeah. So my passion, as you know, Jay, is adding rentals to my portfolio with little to no money. It's the BRRRR Method 101. And that's my passion. That's what I love to teach people. And I love to, help people buy their first rental property. And I like people to also come into the group that have a couple, and we can help them scale it up to 20, 30, 50, whatever that may be. So to learn more about me and the method, as well as the coaching and mentoring that I do, there's a link right here at the bottom of the screen. It's wholesalinginc.com/rentals. And that link will take you over to, again, you had mentioned earlier, the Wholesaling Inc.'s website. And if you click, or, you do the /rentals, you can learn about my program and, again, learn more about me and, how I could help you. But I love working with people that are excited. Hopefully they have a good energy like I do, and we can take their portfolio, to the next level. I mean, the goal here with rentals and real estate at the end of the day, Jay, is to acquire freedom. Is it not?
That's what we want. Wealth and freedom.
Wealth and freedom. And most people, their goal is they want to be financially free. And that was my goal too, until I realized that time was more valuable than money. But it's very difficult to get time freedom without the financial freedom aspect. So, most people, if you ask them, hey, what's your goal? They're going to be like, it'd be cool to be financially free, but they don't ever say time freedom. But as we mature and grow as investors, we realize that financial freedom is really step 1. Step 2, where we really all want to be, is to have time freedom. And that's really what having a rental portfolio will do. It's amazing.
Stay connected with David Dodge at www.wholesalinginc.com/rentals. And that is spelled wholsalinginc.com/rentals. David, God bless you, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Jay. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Mine too. There you have it. Another wrap for this show. I'm Jay Connor, the Private Money Authority, and we really appreciate all of your likes, your shares, your ratings. We love the 5-star ratings on iTunes. Give us a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure and tap and click that bell so you don't miss out on any more notifications of my amazing guests that join me here on the show. Here's to taking your business to the next level, and we'll see you right here on the next show.